The third class of organism that we're going to talk about in chordata is the reptilia. People often mistake reptiles and amphibians for each other, but there are a few key characteristics that help ensure that they are distinguished from each other. The characteristics, and you will want to space these out a little bit, are they have watertight, dry skin. They have scales instead of that smooth, moist skin. They have clawed toes. If you look at the feet and the toes of amphibians, you'll notice that they're just kind of padded. There's no nail or claw there. So reptiles have the claws. They have ectothermic metabolism, which we'll talk more about, and they don't have any feathers or hair, which will help distinguish them from the mammals and the birds. The endoskeleton of reptiles is made of bone. Just like in the bony fish, just like in the amphibians, we have a skeleton made of bone. Next to where you wrote ectothermic metabolism, write this explanation of it. So many organisms have ectothermic metabolism prior to the reptiles, but we tend to think of it as something that's characteristic of them. And we see it probably most often in them, and the need for them to utilize the heat from the environment in order to gain and maintain body temperature. So ectothermic metabolism, they consume food just like other animals, but they are not able to regulate their own body temperature. They have to use heat from the environment in order to be able to go through their metabolism and utilize the energy that they've gained from the food they've consumed. What this means is if a reptile is not warmed up by the environment, they're going to be slower, they're going to be more sluggish, and they're not going to be as efficient and effective in hunting and evading prey or predators. And so they often you'll see them basking, which is the two pictures I have here, basking in the sunlight to bring their body temperature up to be able to function and move. They are very slow when they are cold because they are ectothermic. They cannot regulate their own body temperature. This also allows them to not have to eat a lot of food. When we think about when reptiles eat, it's very rarely because they pull a lot of the heat from the environment to regulate their body temperature, whereas mammals and birds, they consume far more because they need to utilize it to maintain their body temperature. For respiration and circulation, the reptile's lungs are going to have larger surface area. This is going to allow for more oxygen to be pulled into them and allow for more efficient circulation and respiration and delivery of oxygen to the body. One key difference that we see between the reptilian heart and the amphibian heart is that it's kind of hard to see here, but there's a little black line that we now see separating the two ventricles. So yesterday we saw that in the amphibian heart we had two atria and one ventricle. Now what we see is that there is two atria and we start to have a division where there are two ventricles. It is not completely divided though, so it's still lacking in its efficiency compared to that of the mammal or the bird heart, but it is more efficient than the amphibian heart. So we start to get this thing called the septum, which is just like what you have between your nose and your nostrils. You have this septum that divides your nose into two separate nostrils. This septum starts to divide the ventricles into two different ventricles. Moving from the amphibians to reptiles, we see a major change in the reproduction. They have internal fertilization, so the female is going to be fertilized internally from the male. The development of the offspring is going to happen outside of the female. So internal fertilization, but then she will lay eggs and the development will happen externally. The key difference between the amphibian and the reptilian egg and the development of that egg is that we have what is called now an amniotic egg. An amniotic egg will be seen from reptiles through aves or birds and mammals. The amniotic egg is watertight and contains both the water and the food supply for that embryo as it grows and develops. The main difference between that and amphibians and fish is that those two groups needed water in order to reproduce because they did not have an amniotic egg that contained that nutrients in that water. Because of the development of the amniotic egg, the mother can now lay the eggs away from a water source, and they will be able to grow and have the adequate nutrients that it needs. This process of laying eggs that hatch outside of the mother is called oviparous. So ova meaning egg, that tells us that egg is hatching outside of the mother. This is different than we will see in mammals, but it is the same as we will see in birds. There are 5 groups of reptiles, and we're not really going to write a lot about either one of these, so you can kind of just list them on that page. But we have the turtles and the tortoises, tuateras, which can be seen here at this bottom left picture, the crocodiles and alligators, the lizards, and the snakes. These are the 5 groups. Notice that they all have scales, they all have the claws, and they have watertight skin, so they do not have to live in a water source. They are not amphibians, they are reptiles.